On Sky News last night, they asked Professor Morandi, our chief guest tonight on the mother of all talk shows, if Iran would return to the negotiating table. As Professor Morandi, in his inimitable, matchless, peerless style, pointed out with his trademark smile, Iran was at the negotiating table when the sneak attack was mounted. In the dead of night, like thieves, they stole in, having infiltrated Iran for many months in advance. They did succeed in killing a lot of folks, as President Obama might put it. But the graveyards are full of irreplaceable people, as Colonel Douglas Macgregor has just opined. All of these people have now been replaced, and there doesn't seem, on the face of it, to have been any loss of effectiveness in Iran's ability to retaliate. We have warned on the mother of all talk shows, with Scott Ritter, with Professor Morandi, with guest after guest after guest, that Iran has the means to defend itself. It is not the Gaza Strip, and even there, with their bare hands if necessary, the fighters are defending themselves from Israeli invasion. This is not the Taliban. This is not Afghanistan. This is a country of almost 100 million people with a military-industrial complex so highly developed that customers are queuing at the door to buy their wares. And in particular, we have warned over and over again that the so-called Iron Dome was made of paper. We have warned over and over again that the TAD was bad. We have warned every time that the Patriot will betray you. It is no pleasure to see civilian targets being bombed in Tel Aviv, at least not for me. Though I've got to tell you, having just returned from the area, that the Islamic Republic of Iran often demonized, destabilized, subverted, multiply sanctioned, derided, insulted, has become the hero of the global South, has become the hero of the global East, has become the hero of the Arab and Muslim world, has become the hero of a very substantial minority of the people of the Western imperial countries themselves. A huge, unchallengeable, global majority wants Iran to prevail in this conflict. But for me, having been under bombs in Ethiopia, in Beirut, in the south of Lebanon, I take no pleasure whatsoever in the aerial pulverizing of built-up areas. Although it turns out that Israel has placed its command and control centers underneath hospitals. I'm not making that one up. That happens to be the truth. Israel has placed its military assets amidst densely populated civilian populations. I'm not making that one up either. Every accusation is a confession, as people now very frequently point out. But the truth is, Israel had this coming. Israel is getting a bloody good hiding. They laughed on night one. They're not laughing now. And they'll be laughing even less by the end of this night if the statements coming from Tehran are anything like accurate. The way I look at it is that Israel is practically, to all intents and purposes, certainly against hypersonic ballistic missiles, completely defenseless. The expensive American defensive shields are not worth the paper that they are made of. And so, if Iran has the supply, the demand is certainly there from the global majority. Keep on firing these missiles until you have taught this bloodthirsty regime in Tel Aviv a lesson they will never forget. Indeed, I just heard Scott Ritter say on another program that this actually could be the end of Israel. I very much doubt that that is true. But it will be a different Israel that will emerge from this conflict. And the longer that the conflict goes on, the more the change will be. Donald Trump, as I said, has done an Anna Baerbock. He started out with what he thought was plausible deniability, denying that America was involved in this attack upon Iran. Although that is plainly ridiculous, and not just for the obvious reason that every aircraft, every missile, every bomb, every bullet, every shekel is given to Israel by the taxpayer of the United States, but not just for that reason. It's clearly obvious that American military assets were assisting the Israeli attack. The US Air Force sweeps in Iraq were for a reason. They were, on the first night, an attempt to ensure that the Iranian retaliation would not get off the ground, at least not in that direction. The American puppets in the region, like the dwarf king of Jordan, are, of course, entirely controlled by the United States of America. The truth is that the United States is involved, but there is an open question, still open, as to what extent they want to get further involved. And that, I think, is something that Netanyahu cannot rely upon. It's said, maybe false, there's a lot of false information in the ether, that the United States has warned Netanyahu not to try to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. This has been denied from Tel Aviv, but it has not been denied from Washington. The United States' latest pronunciamento on Truth Social, because that's how diplomacy is done these days, calls for the United States to be allowed to mediate a peace. Donald Trump spent an hour on the phone with President Putin just earlier today. And in that, he said on Truth Social that both presidents demand that this war should end. Well, if that is the American position, they are in a unique place to bring it to an end. They simply have to order the Netanyahu government to cease and desist and make reparation for the killings and the damage that they have done with what is a completely illegal attack, a sneak attack, a Pearl Harbor sneak attack. Every person that they've killed, every dollar of damage that they have done was illegally imposed and must be repaired at the expense of Israel and its allies. The United States is in a position to order Netanyahu to cease and desist the mass killing of the people in Gaza, in Jerusalem, of the West Bank. The President of the United States can order Netanyahu to cease and desist his latest wave of settlement plans, rendering null and void any possibility ever of a Palestinian state emerging in the West Bank. Now, none of these things is likely to happen, but all of these things must be demanded. And lastly, President Trump is in a position, and colon cancer may be given and cited as the reason, to demand that Netanyahu finally departs the scene. As long as he does not, the global perception will be that this is Netanyahu's war. It's a war being fought to save Netanyahu's skin. Now, I myself don't personally believe that. Neither do I believe that the removal of Netanyahu and his replacement by one or other of the ghouls at the top of the Zionist tree from all of the Zionist parties, but the world believes that this is Netanyahu's crime. And Donald Trump, if he wants to center the United States in any peacemaking position, then he's going to have to demand that and all of these things. But these things are unlikely to happen, and the war will continue. It's my belief that Israel has bitten off more than it's able to chew. And I'm not just saying this now, I've been saying it throughout this crisis. And my guests on the show have been saying this throughout this crisis. Anyone who saw the hypersonic missile at lightning speed striking the oil refinery, vital oil refinery in Haifa last night, already knows that these missiles cannot be stopped. And Israel's defense systems will not be able to repel them. The only question will be, how many missiles does Iran have? Now, I'm not privy to that information. I was invited whilst in Tehran to visit some military places, but I declined. Not my cup of tea. But I'm certainly willing to guess that Iran has thousands and maybe tens of thousands of these missiles. And given that they're coming in at 300 or so per night, and the ballistics, hypersonic ballistics, are coming in at 1 or 2 per night, Iran is much better placed for the long war, especially as it has public support almost throughout the world, while Israel, which has virtually no support in the world, only from the leaders of the empire and its satrapies, not even its Arab satrapies, none of them, they are all quailing at the possibility that Iran will blame them for United States and Israeli perfidy and the bombing campaign, which is undoubtedly hurting, harming innocents, slaughtering innocents, like a family that was slaughtered last night in Tehran in total. But the satrapies in Europe, of course, have been already unmasked. Germany, stupidly, was caught with the German refueling aircraft switching on its transponder very briefly over Syria. That's the Syria that they destroyed over the last 10 years and more, and thought that with the puppet regime now in Damascus, they can use the airspace of Syria at will. And a German refueler, a tanker plane, was caught electronically, momentarily, but caught forever, refueling Israeli warfighters on their way to Iran. So the Germans are in the war. Keir Starmer, despite presiding over the lowest approval ratings of any British Prime Minister in the entire history of polling, and presiding over a country that is rapidly sliding into the status of third world slum, has sent our brave men and women of the Royal Air Force to the Middle East. He has denuded Britain's defences of our own island and sent it to the Middle East, and, quote, has not ruled out, and neither did the hateful Rachel Reeves, his Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's paying for all this. She wouldn't rule out either those assets being used to defend Israel. And of course, the broadcast section of the British state, Sky News, the BBC, are firing on all cylinders, but they are finding it increasingly difficult to find an audience that believes them. Truth is, Israel is in big, big trouble now. And those that have supported Israel are in even bigger trouble. They're going against the wishes of their own people, and their own assets, if deployed in the war zone, are in very real danger of being destroyed. We don't have many Air Force jets, but if they start being blown out of the sky, and if our brave airmen, sailors, even soldiers begin to come home in boxes, then never mind World War III, this limited regional war itself may bring down their governments completely. The Other issue that I want to discuss is much less consensual, and it relates to the poll that we're running this evening. Would Netanyahu have attacked a nuclear-armed Iran? Now, this is not the first time I'm saying this. I have said this in Tehran publicly. It's not the first time I've said it on air. I've even said it on Iranian TV publicly. It is an act of folly. There are multiple acts of folly. Believing Donald Trump was an act of folly. Having top commanders living at home with their families on the night of infamy was a folly. But not having made a nuclear weapon when you can make one is itself a folly. It's really very simple. If Iran had nuclear weapons, as is always alleged, this would not be happening. Israel would not be attacking Iran. America wouldn't dream of threatening to attack Iran if Iran had nuclear weapons. If I can put it very colloquially, succinctly, nobody will ever attack North Korea. They'll sanction it, they'll isolate it, they'll laugh at it, but they will never, ever attack it. Nobody will ever attack Pyongyang. Nobody will ever bomb Pyongyang, because Pyongyang has a government that is bristling with nuclear weapons and has the balls to use them in extremis. And so, given that Iran has, since the triumph of the Islamic Revolution, been surrounded by states which hate it and want to regime change it, who are nuclear armed, it is a folly for Iran not to have a nuclear weapon. I know there are people who so hate nuclear weapons that they don't like to hear me talk this way. And I hate them. I've been arrested at the British nuclear weapons base at Faslane and tossed into Greenock jail and didn't even get a blanket on a cold winter's night. I know that people consider that nuclear weapons are qualitatively different from all other weapons, being unlimited in space and time, and of course they are. But if you are in the crosshairs of not just Israel, with its hundreds of undeclared, illegally acquired, illicitly held nuclear weapons, and if you are in the crosshairs of the second greatest nuclear armed power in the world, the United States of America, you really can't avoid the conclusion that you must get yourself a nuclear weapon if you scientifically, technically, and financially can do so. And that's why I say that the earthquake of 4.3 on the Richter scale in Baluchistan this evening near the Iranian-Pakistani border, for Iran's sake, I hope it was an underground nuclear test. It's all coming up over the next 2 hours. The peerless Professor Marandi from Tehran live. He's up right after this. Stay tuned.